Benjamin Franklin is...
Excuse me. Benjamin Franklin is one of the most prolific inventors of the 18th century. Thank you, Nathan, for fetching me this glass of water from the well. It always goes down smooth.
Let's get back to the story, Uncle Walter.
Calm yourself, young Nathan. As always, there's a spot up here on my lap just for you. And it's getting cold. Brr.
Oh boy.
All right, where was I? Once upon a time, there was a dancer, and his name was... Oh, silly me. I was accidentally reading Son of the Dinosaur there. Here, let's flip back to the new stuff. Ah, yes. Once upon a time, there was a dancer, and his name was Dinosaur. He roamed about the countryside to reach the local YMCA, where he was receiving fatherly advice from Father Bill in the midst of an uncomfortably religious bout of racquetball. The man in tearaway vestments removed his prescription transitions sports goggles to bathe in the unobstructed gaze of our persistent pilgrim yearning for direction in this darkest hour.
Chapstick?
The Faja queried, rummaging deep into his nearly empty jockstrap and emerging with his licorice lip balm.
Your lips look severely burnt.
Dinosaur's big baby blues pierced him through and through, causing him to stop beating around the burning bush, as Moses would say.
My sage advice isn't sage enough. You must consult someone even more sager. My Faja, or at least the man I wish was my Faja.
Dinosaur flared his nostrils as if to say, where? The perspiring pastor once again plunged his clammy claws into his now even more empty jockstrap and further emptied it, brandishing a damp piece of paper. Father Bill bowed his head and broke ticket, motioning for Dinosaur to tip back his head and reverently open the door to his teeth house. The holy man piously placed his ticket stub on Dinosaur's outstretched tongue, saying,
Take this, Dinosaur, and use it, for this is my ticket to the Edmonton 5000, which will be given up for you.
In a similar way, when their allotted time in the racquetball court had ended, he took his half-drunk generic sports drink in his cramped and venerable hands, and, once more turning to Dinosaur, he took one last swig and gave the bottle to his disciple, saying,
Take this, Dinosaur, and drink from it, for this is the last of my Gatorade. The Gatorade of the new and eternal covenant, which will be poured out for you on your journey for the quench of your thirst. Do this in memory of me.
The clergyman's pastoral pager loudly rang out, echoing through the vacant YMCA halls.
By Jove, I've been called away on an emergency sabbatical.
Father Bill yelled over his shoulder, making haste westward, chasing the echo at a breakneck speed only reachable by a 70-something in tearaway vestments. And so, like the pilgrims before him, Dinosaur tightened the laces of his Air Jordans and embarked on his transcontinental quest
to Canada. Our determined dancer set off on foot until he reached his moped and hopped on. And after only a mere fortnight of scooting, Dinosaur planted his kickstand for one last time in the heart of Alberta, the home of the Edmonton 5000, the greatest goose race to ever live.
This is the greatest goose race to ever live,
said Skeeter Cabbagefoot.
I'm Skeeter Cabbagefoot,
he said.
But you can call me not your grandpa.
he said.
'Cause I ain't.
Skeeter finally concluded. This typical Canadian greeting impregnated Dinosaur's eyeball with a seed of sorrow. Its water broke, birthing a single salty tear that gently crawled down his face over and under each wrinkle and crease until it reached his chin. The tear fell to the ground as Dinosaur fell to one knee. Dinosaur flared his nostrils as if to say, "Holy smokes, I can't hold it in you completely. You've always been there for me. You make my pueblo bueno. Will you be my grandpa?"
No! But I will be your grandfather.
Are you gonna bet or what?
Interjected the short man working the Edmonton 5000's wager window.
Give me 500 big ones on Catheter Jones.
I told you once. I told you 1,000 times. You're the only one that calls him that. It's the Albert Tan Assassin.
Said Skeeter Cabbagefoot as he turned and scooted toward the stadium seating with Dinosaur in tow. As they scuttled, they became increasingly aware of what is that sound? A sweet, sweet serenade? A street performer, perhaps? Peddling his tune to any passerby who would pay him mind? The lively ditty danced down the cavernous passageway, beckoning those faring their way to the light at the end. It was a blue, cheeky melody, a coy mistress that could have only been so wooed by an absolute scamp and scoundrel on the sax. Yet, despite its playfulness, something about the joyful noise set Dinosaur on edge, an unease that was vindicated as he squinted into the light and uncovered a Benjamin Franklin-like silhouette blocking the exit of the tunnel.
Gadzooks! It's Thomas Jefferson, my arch rival.
Benjamin Franklin tooted his sax menacingly, as if to say,
Can't believe you'd show your face around here after the beating your poor excuse for a race goose took last week and every week for the past decade. Old Benny paused to re-wet his reed, and with an equally menacing toot, continued. Here to make it interesting, mano a mano for all the marbles. If your Albert Tan Assassin manages to beat my moles and muscle, I'll hand over to you my most valuable possession. Monsieur Franklin flung open his trench coat, exposing both himself and his radiant ball of celestial gas, the object for which Dinosaur had been searching this entire time.
Well,
Said Skeeter Cabbagefoot.
if you're gonna bet your son,
He said.
I'll bet my son.
He said.
Grandson.
Oh, they shook on it right as the pistol fired. The gates flew open and the gaggle of geese galloped out onto the track. After no more than a few goose paces, there wasn't a clean goose suit left in the bunch, as the webbed cleats of the grounded fowl kicked up a storm of soggy soil drenched from last night's downpour. These unforeseen conditions bogged down the usual favorites like the Ottoman Empire, the Smokin' Manitoban, the Nova Scotian Explosion, Low-Tech Quebec, the Halifax Machine, Wings of Windsor, the Yukon Crouton, Manitoban Toby, Toronto Tim, you know him. Who else? Saskatchewan Kenobi, the Iron Crotch, and, of course, Benjamin Franklin's go-to goose bet, the Moles and Muzzle. The only remaining contestant was the Albert Tan Assassin, the ancient cross-eyed geezer of a goose who, for once, was not in his usual last place. He left the other geese to eat his feathers, breaking out ahead and bounding across the bog with ease, for he was truly the mother of the dinosaur. He loved the slop. He ate it up.
That's my Catheter Jones.
Yelled Skeeter. Dinosaur wanted to sneak a peek at the son he had longed so many moons for, but he couldn't pull his eyes from the gripping goose race and chance a glance at Ben Franklin's very public privates. The Albert Tan Assassin was nearing the final turn. He was just a hop, skip, and a jump away. The finish line was in sight, along with his first win since the Reagan administration. All he had to do was keep his head down and run. That's all he was ever good for anyway. In only a few more goose steps, he would restore his former glory and return the sun to where it belonged. The old race goose became drunk on the preemptive euphoria of victory that used to be so familiar in his youth. Victory that put him on the front of every Wheaties box across Canada. Victory that landed him the centerfold of every Play Goose magazine from July of 78 to June of 87. Victory first secured in that fateful race where he debuted his later signature move, the Vancouver Maneuver. It had been years since this saggy sack of feathers had dared attempt it, but his body moved on its own. Muscle memory took over, and before he knew it, he succumbed to hubris. Determination dethroned doubt. Adrenaline ousted arthritis. Spreading his wings and clenching his cheeks, he prepared to push off and take flight! His arthritic knees immediately snapped. He fell beak first into the muck and, since his pursuers were only a hop, skip, and a triple jump away, was at once trampled into his beloved mud as the throng crossed the finish line. In a photo finish, the Molson Muscle won by a beak. Skeeter cried out in despair as he sank to the ground in a puddle of defeat.
My catheter!
He cried again, clutching his waist. Before he could react, Dinosaur was whisked away into the dank darkness of Old Benny's trench coat. He couldn't believe it. To lose? After coming so far. So far from the despicable $1.50 deficit that got him into this whole mess. $1.50 short of the 40 big ones Benny had so long ago demanded as bail. For Dino's precious son. A Washington and a pair of smaller, shiny Washingtons shy of Franklin's frivolous fee, only to now lie at Franklin's syphilis feet. He had come so far, and yet here he lay, splayed on the pavement, indentured in his trench coat, gambled as the ante of an unwinnable bet, staked against a stacked deck in the house, won. Happiness, hate, and a holy man, a hapless fate and a bold new plan. Pursuits wandered and youth squandered. To sell your soul for a silver bullet and pull the trigger to find it was a blank. And his mind went blank. Save for one thought. He would never be reunited with the sun. But no sooner than that final thought passed through his head hung with shame, did Dinosaur notice a raging warmth toasting his bummed little buns. A luminescent, lucent bloom that blossomed and embosomed his bottom. Stellar light expelled unquelled on his right. In this darkest night, he was not alone. In this darkest night, he was bathed in light that bounced off of the bedazzled jewels dangling from Benjamin's pierced nipples, like solar-powered disco balls. The brilliant shimmering danced across the inner lining of the trench coat as Dinosaur danced with his prodigal son. It suddenly dawned upon him that due to the structure of Skeeter and Franklin's bet, he and his son would have been reunited whatever the outcome of the goose race was. No matter now, his past trials and tribulations melted like butter. Even in a place like this, he and his son could dance their troubles away. Dinosaur, dinosaur, yeah. It's a son of a dinosaur. He's a dinosaur. Dinosaur, dinosaur, dinosaur. It's a son of a dinosaur. He's a dinosaur. Better than the father. Dinosaur, dinosaur, dinosaur. It's a son of a, it's a son of a, it's a son of any better than the father. Dinosaur, dinosaur, dinosaur. It's a son of a, it's a dinosaur. It's a son of any better than the screamed Skeeter Cabbagefoot as he interrupted the dance party by delivering an unlikely haymaker to the founding father's face. Yep, right in the kisser. Dinosaur and his son tumbled out into the open air as the old codgers tussled feebly on the ground in grave combat. Benjamin's disco nips glinting wildly in the sunlight as if he were breastfeeding a pair of epileptic fireflies. Well, our fortuitous heroes took this chance to make a break for it, hightailing it toward Dinosaur's moped. Unfortunately, the most direct path was directly across the racetrack. As they fled, their unwebbed, uncleated feet sunk deep into the mire of muck. Stuck in the muck. Two plucky, unlucky schmucks struck and stuck in the sucky Canuck muck, and all they could say was fudge. Children, all they could say was, oh, fudge. Utterly immobilized, they knew their fates were sealed as they cast their gaze toward the impending stampede. The race geese who had not slowed since crossing the finish line were as usual booking it to the local sports bar where they would hang out, have a beer and unwind. I said, hang out, have a beer and unwind as they enjoyed a live performance by Steppin' Goose. Excuse me. As the horde advanced, Dinosaur used his final moments to hold his son in a warm embrace, severely searing all the skin on his arms and chest. In a fatal flurry of feathers and blood and guts and poop, for Dinosaur had been holding it in, son and the Dinosaur were trampled to death. The end.